Well, welcome to Beyond Belief. I'm George Norrie, and we have two special guests for you today, Dr. J.J. Hurtak and his wife, Desiree. We are going to be talking about their work in the field of anthropology, ancient civilizations, and they have done extensive work. One of their books is called The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. J.J. and Desiree, welcome to Beyond Belief.
Thank you, George.
Good to see both of you. And you have been a superstar on our radio show, Coast to Coast AM.
I have, and I'm privileged to be here. You, George, are a great pioneer of the future, so we're glad to join the team.
Tell me about Enoch. Who was Enoch?
Enoch, in the biblical traditions, is the man who walks with God, the one who was taken in the book of Genesis to see the divine dimension.
Was he a human?
He was a human who was able to graduate into the angelic category.
Right, he's very much like Elijah, who was taken up, and he's also known as one who initiates into light. And so it's very interesting because he was one of the ancient peoples who talked about many worlds, many realms.
Now, when you put your book together, the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch, how did you even start your research?
It was based upon an experience I had as a young professor. I was teaching Oriental science, traditional teachings of the Near East and the Far East, and I kept running into the metaphor of beings of light, angelic forms, and I felt I could not, in intellectual honesty, speak to my students about these other realms without some type of experience. And so I began to, shall we say, compose linguistic formulas based upon ancient writings. And I was also trained as a musician, so I used musical cues and ancient linguistic expressions. And at one point, a morphogenic field opened to me in a moment of prayer. My body was bilocated physically into another dimension. And in that moment of seeing literally beings of light, I was given, as it were, the background of this remarkable book.
And as a student, I can tell you when he came back, his whole reality changed. He knew other situations. He could describe and detail things that had been talked about for 6,000 years. So he had information from the past, the present, and also the future.
How long were you technically gone?
2.5 days, if you count the physical time. Fortunately, I was teaching at California Institute of the Arts, which is a California school,
Right.
funded by Walt Disney and his brother. And some of my students had cameras so they could actually take pictures of the light around my body. And
When you came back, yeah.
And that was what was of interest because this light phenomena continued for a few weeks.
Now, for 2.5 days, though, were you physically gone?
I was physically in another dimension for 2.5 days.
Jeez, and then when you appeared back in the classroom?
No, I appeared at a home in Sausalito, California, where I was staying.
Actually, this was January 2nd and 3rd, so it was during vacation break.
And so pictures were taken of me because this phenomena continued for a while. And naturally, the book I wrote, Keys of Enoch, is an Enochian experience of the light journey that I experienced.
But now, many years later, we realize that really most things in this book have come to pass, such as the Great Pyramid connected with Orion, multiverses, many universes, many realms. So this is all of what he saw. And like Enoch, who was taken to these other heavens, if you read the ancient Ethiopic Book of Enoch, it's very, very similar on some levels, but it's also very relevant for us today.
You were years ahead of your time, weren't you?
20 years before Robert Bevell, and showing the relationship between the star shafts of the Great Pyramid and the 3 stars in the belt of Orion. Many years before those NASA scientists who said the sun now is considered a variable star.
He actually had the same words in the thing. It says the sun is a variable star. And then someone from JPL just about like 7 years ago came out with the exact same words.
Well, maybe they saw the book. Is that possible?
Well, it's really more, I think, consciousness. Once you bring that information through, people start looking and coming into that. That's what we feel. We're not saying people really take from the book.
Who beamed you into that other dimension, basically?
I would say, to use a biblical expression, the sons of light, the B'nai Elohim.
But they asked if he was ready. I think that's the difference. Some people say, oh, you were abducted by an ET. But, you know, he actually was asked, are you ready? And you said?
I was.
So you basically gave them permission.
I gave them permission. And I said in my prayer, if I could be shown there was a higher realm of intelligence, a divine source, something beyond the average aspect of astronomy, I would dedicate my life to bringing forth the higher message. And as a result of my experience, I felt a need to bring together a blueprint of how the spiritual and the scientific converge and harmonize on a much higher level, whereas on the human level, they're in opposition, as it is traditionally taught.
Well, when you were, and I'm going to use the phrase beam back because it's easier for me to comprehend this. Did you see things in the future as well?
I did see things into the future, which is in my other books that I've written since that time. I saw that there would be evidences of an archive of information discovered under the Giza Plateau. I saw, for example, things that would be discovered in the South Pacific in terms of an earlier branch of the human experiment of life that took place in the Isle of Flores in Indonesia. And this was confirmed in the beginning of this present century by anthropologists, the Homo floresiensis, as the diminutive human is called. And I saw that there would be increasing ET events or extraterrestrial events that would force the governments to go into disclosure.
Which may or may not happen at this point, huh?
We're very close to what I consider to be the taste of honey, the fact that we are not alone in the universe, that we as a human race are one of many, many races. Well, the Taklamakan Desert means he who enters does not return. It's one of the greatest deserts in Central Asia. In 1988, with permission of the Chinese authorities, my wife and I had the opportunity to conduct a small expedition into this area. And as you can see by the film, these are proto-Europeans, not Asians,
right,
who once lived in Central Asia.
Right, you have red hair on the mummies. You also have almost a type of tattoo on the face, because these were people who were living there and got into nature, so to speak. But we were there. We actually saw some of these mummies. And the reason why we went is because the Keys of Enoch talk about the Taklamakan as one of the key places for really civilization to start. And what we feel at one point that there was a whole different climate at the time. And so people were able to live there and thrive there.
Not only that, but there was the discovery of an underground hydraulic system.
Really? They were advanced.
Yeah, the Chinese still use it today to water their trees and plants.
This is the basis of what we call the Great Wall of China, going through the desert now to reclaim much of the Taklamakan Desert for future irrigation and ecological communities.
It looks like a treacherous area, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's mostly desert right now, but it's really right down from Tibet. So you wonder if some of the Tibetan knowledge didn't also come from the people that had lived in the Taklamakan.
Now, when you say had lived, where'd they go? What happened to them?
Due to climate change at that time, several thousand years before the present era, it is believed that most of the Proto-Europeans who were in the plains area of the western part of the Taklamakan Basin simply went over to the European side, the steppes of Russia, Ukraine, and into Eastern Europe.
And that's why the Chinese don't really like this information, because they weren't Chinese, as the document said. And so there's the Han people, and there's also the other people, the Uyghur people, that they claim that those were them, but also they probably went to Hungary, to Europe, to made the whole pilgrimage to maybe where we are today.
I would say the Chinese were very respectful of our being there. So what Desiree said reflects only a small branch of what we call traditional sinologists. The majority of Chinese archaeologists and anthropologists were very helpful and acknowledge that this is an information base that can help understand early Eastern as well as Western civilization.
Well, it's almost like Egypt, where Hawass, for example, wants everything Egyptian. If you would bring to the table any possibilities that the pyramids may have been constructed by outside sources, not Egyptians, he goes ballistic. Same thing with the Chinese?
Yes, I would say knowing Dr. Hawass in the formal sense, with a wink of the eye, there's an understanding that there is another area of Egyptology that needs to be explored that is under the sands of Egypt, not just on the surface. What we see on the surface is just the tip of an iceberg of a vast civilization. Desiree and I feel is much earlier and more, should we say, elongated in terms of its influences.
If there was one of those civilizations, tell me the effect on planet Earth at that time. How advanced were they?
Well, one of the things that the Chinese have brought out is these people may have invented the wheel. And of course, they're not so happy about that. That was one of the reasons. So, you know, the wheel really changed our culture, our civilization. And we feel, actually, there's a picture in the Keys of Enoch that talks about these cities that were on tops of mountains that we believe they had lived in. This is something that the Russians, back in the 40s, were able to get in and see. There's these ancient cities still there in the area of the desert near the Taklamakan. So I think that they were advanced. These were not people living in huts. These were people living in, we'll say, mud brick.
Did they have high technology?
Well, it's always a question. Dr. Hurtak actually had brought out the fact that there was like a type of disc record, and we see that like today in CDs. Now, whether those were really electronic or not, has yet to be seen. They haven't really.
What else would they have used it for?
I know,
right?
but these are possibilities of documents and records that may be storage. Like you take crystal skulls. People feel that there's actually information coded in the crystal skulls.
It's almost as if it's a chip.
Right. So exactly, and we didn't even understand that, say, 40 years ago when the Keys of Enoch came out, how you could code information, how you can use even Wi-Fi to communicate and do things. And I think all these things, some of the ancients had, and they used in certain ways that we're just understanding today.
That's pretty fascinating.
So our work has been, over the last 45 years, to connect, as it were, the databases of earlier civilization throughout the world. Societies that were able to provide food and water for their respective communities, have very advanced astrophysical calendar systems, as well as language systems that provided what we call a navigational society to circumnavigate Mother Earth and point out areas of information and development far earlier than that which we see in classical Egyptology and Western European and Oriental history.
Is there a message behind some of these past civilizations that we need to accept and understand as people of today?
Yes, the message is we are all connected with Mother Earth and with Mother Heavens, and that we are on a journey of life that connects us in a very unique way with starborn cultures. And you see this whether it's in the high deserts of South America or in the deserts and landscapes of the Near East, in the Far East. People who were developing the astronomical gifts very early with great mathematical skill and understanding.
And we feel, in a sense, we're kind of colonists here. And we've talked to Credo Mutua, who's a very old friend of ours. We've known him since the 1980s and did a documentary with him, that he said that people lived on Mars. This is part of the Zulu culture. And they came in Maracaibo, which is very close to the word Merkaba, and they came to Africa, and because Mars was changing its environment. So, and we've talked to many other people who say even this planet, of course, goes through these cycles of environmental change. Elizabeth Clark, if we're talking about South Africa, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, she wrote a book called Beyond the Light Barrier. She was a very good friend of ours. And she wrote in the 70s, but from her experience in the 50s, that she was in contact with extraterrestrial civilizations from Alpha Centauri, which is really one of the closest stars. It's less than 5 light years away, which is pretty close when you talk about other, constellations. And that they had to leave this planet because of environmental changes, but they kept a base in Antarctica. She said this in the 70s in her books.
Yeah, she was way ahead of her
way
time,
ahead.
too.
She was a magnificent person.
Merkaba means in Hebrew the spiritual vehicle of ascension or space travel. And so when Desiree made the reference to the Zulu tradition linguistically connected with the Near Eastern languages, we're speaking about metaphors and symbols that we have seen in different language groups throughout the world.
You were one of the first, Dr. Hurtak, to also talk about similarities between Earth and Mars in terms of structures and pyramids. How did you come about that knowledge?
Well, I had the opportunity many years ago to work in remote viewing programs, and I had a astrophysical experience of seeing briefly that there were structures on Mars similar to what we find throughout Mother Earth, namely pyramidal grids or pyramidal geometries. Mm-hmm. And so I had told some of my friends at NASA before the Mariner 9.
What did they say?
Well, they said they would take a look, and so when the Mariner 9 brought back over 50,000 pictures, there in the Elysium Quadrangle, there was a series of major and minor pyramids, and I had the opportunity to get permission to publish in the Keys of Enoch the actual documents long before everybody got involved in the act in the 1980s. This was in 1973.
What did NASA say behind the scenes about some of these structures?
Well, of course, they think it's just wind formations, wind blasts. But when you look at 4 structures together, they form a grid point. So, these things could be when you get up there, but we feel that actually there was civilization before on Mars. Mars now lost its magnetic field, and so in turn its atmosphere, we know that there was actually more water on Mars, and this is scientifically proven now, than there is on Earth.
Is it gone, or is it deep within the planet?
Some of it obviously went into the crevices. Some of it is still in certain places, maybe in frozen ice. But for the most part, because when you lose your atmosphere, you lose your structure, literally.
I had the opportunity to release this on a worldwide telecast, Good Morning Australia, where the Australians were a bit more open-minded, and so we had the opportunity to show close-ups of these gargantuan pyramidal landforms. And again, later, of course, we know that many Americans got into the popular literature of pyramids in the face on Mars, but we were the first really to bring this out.
Right, and this is called the Sagan pyramids now. Of course, Carl Sagan was very popular.
Brought out 4 arguments why these were natural phenomena. We were the result of supersonic windburst, a regolithic mantle building, all sorts of technical language that a geologist would use, but clearer examination of this over the years privately by think tanks in our country as well as Russia affirmed the fact that these clear-standing forms, 3-sided, 4-sided, 5-sided, were not the result of wind blasts, but were there as a type of terraforming that would exist from a previous possible extrasolar civilization.
Well, and you wouldn't think that wind blasts would carve out 4 or 5-sided pyramids.
This was the argument of Credo Mutwa, the great Zulu shaman, who was also an artist and architect. He said anybody who looked clearly at this would see that the supersonic winds would wear down, but these were structures that stood there for thousands upon thousands of years.
Lots of theories abound about how pyramids were constructed.
La pyramide, je pense, a été créée pour refaire.
In my view, the Great Pyramid was built by Isis. I believe it was created to reincarnate Osiris into Horus. It is quite complicated. The Osirian, the so-called aquatic temple dedicated to Osiris in Abydos, Abaju in Egyptian, means it is located in the city, which is, according to Egyptian history, the first city of Osiris. Yet, to be able to find seashells on a temple located in the middle of the desert, you have to go back thousands of years, at least 10,000 years. Why would he have made such a temple with aquatic features? Because Osiris, who's also Inky, they are the same person, had amphibian genes. Osiris, Inky, was killed by his nemesis Set, who is in fact Enlil, during one of their many battles. It took place in Abydos, which also corresponds to the Sumerian Apsu, where Osiris's aquatic temple can be found. The texts clearly state that all of Osiris's servants were slaughtered during a battle, as well as Osiris himself, who was crucified on a tree. This is how he died. Isis is quite a character. She can't really be found in Mesopotamian literature. Although she could be considered the goddess Ninti, she is the woman who lives in the great deeps, underground. I think that these underground passageways could correspond to the ones we can find under the Giza Plateau. We know that the Giza Plateau is full of underground passages. I believe that the clan of Osiris lived there. As far as the resurrection of Osiris into Horus is concerned, Isis organizes it. The texts are very clear about that, and we understand that she used Osiris's genetic code to create Horus. She created the Great Pyramid in order to accomplish this task. The Great Pyramid allowed Isis to find Osiris's soul again. We don't really know how, but she would have put Horus's genetic code in the pyramid. She would have been able to create another body using Osiris's genetic code, the so-called UF in Egyptian, body. And thanks to the coding of the Great Pyramid, she reached Osiris's soul so it could come into the new body of Horus.
And that, of course, was researcher Anton Parks. Do you agree with him?
Well, he's using the mythological symbol of Isis and Osiris, which we're very familiar with, but there's more to the story. We're scientists, we're looking at the myth behind the myth, the science behind the myth.
Actually, Osiris was cut into something like 14 pieces. Isis, she put those pieces together just long enough to continue the element of, we'll say, sacred birth or pharaohs.
Sometimes the text will say 14, sometimes they'll say 16 parts were reassembled. But the thrust of our work has been to search for the tomb of Osiris.
In late 1990s, with the shore expedition and our very good friend Boris Said, who was an archaeologist in his own right, we went into the tomb of Osiris. Of course, it wasn't called that. And there are, as the film said, many underground passages underneath the Giza plateau. And we went in with radar and sonar because there's water underneath that structure. And we were able to find what was called the tomb itself, which is on a third level down, 100 feet or 30 meters down.
What did you think of it?
Well, we were, so we say, shocked that there would be a moat around the tomb itself, showing that this was organized as a mythological as well as a physical presentation of a different story of evolution of Osiris.
Clearly thought out.
No, I mean, this room, 100 feet down, so you have 3 tiers going down. The second tier actually had several sarcophagi, so it could be part of a family, and the lowest one had the one. But the room itself had corners, because, you know, you think if they just dug and they wanted to bury someone, they don't put corners in the room, but they actually had corners in that room and this moat around it. And we also could see from our radar studies on the walls that there are probably other passages. And we believe that it probably goes all the way to the Great Pyramid. Probably it's connected a little bit with the causeway from the central pyramid to the Sphinx. But we also have certain theories which we're coming out with shortly, which is the fact that water played a key role. In fact, most of the pyramids in Egypt are along the Nile. Now, the Nile is not what it used to be because of the Aswan Dam, but there used to be a much more larger flooding.
It was wider too,
Yeah,
much wider.
and our work with hydrogen energy and Brown's gas, if you're familiar with that, which is where you take water and you make hydrogen and oxygen and you can actually get gas out of it to run electricity, we feel is part of the puzzle, not the only puzzle, but part of the puzzle of Egypt.
So there's a very extensive hydraulic system that the Egyptians, we believe, used for energy production. And if you look very carefully at the hydraulic system underneath the sand through radar, you'll see that possibly these were energy stations that the Egyptians were able to employ. I will want to emphasize, though, we had an opportunity, I in particular, to go into one of the passages, and there are numerous passages under the Giza plateau that connect the step pyramid with the pyramids proper.
If you're claustrophobic, would you go crazy down there?
No, the rooms are quite big, actually. Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing is going up and down the ladders.
The actual passageways themselves have not been fully explored. I had the opportunity to go into one area. There's, at least in my opinion, 3 miles worth of passages.
3 miles?
From the step pyramid to the pyramids proper.
Well, the step pyramid really also being Saqqara. Actually, if you've ever looked inside, which most people haven't, but there's some graphs about it, inside the big step pyramid at Saqqara, you'll find almost like an energy technology. They have these vents, these different corridors. It's very, very unusual. Most people don't even realize it. They think it's just solid with a bunch of little, we'll say, corridors or chambers, but it's much more complex.
What came first, the pyramids or the passageways?
I think they were both in the context of the blueprint put together at the same time, because you cannot construct any edifice without having the proper foundation.
Right.
So there is what we call the basement complex that was engineered, and then upon the basement complex, using water as a way of putting a, shall we say, a good level perspective.
Right.
The Japanese, by the way, in 1978, tried to create the pyramids while we were there, and we have a film showing how they were completely unable with new technology to create a pyramid, even on a small scale.
Right, they try to use barges, and they try to use like primitive cutting tools. They ended up having to use like saws and helicopters to move these bricks, and they didn't even get higher than a 3-story building.
No, we don't even have cranes that could lift those kinds of tonnage of blocks today.
That was shown in the documentary, The Mystery of the Great Sphinx.
And in some cases, though, many scholars that have looked at the Great Pyramid feel that actually it was built in 2 stages. So you have like the inner part of it and then the outer part. I mean, these are all up for grabs. But we do feel the mystery of the Sphinx, which is something with John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, talking about the Sphinx itself and how it was built. But it shows how vibrations, and of course they were just doing little balls, can actually lift the blocks. Because really to try to haul these 2-3-ton blocks up, you know, is amazing. But then inside you get 50-ton, you get 80-ton blocks. That's even harder to move.
Oh my God, yeah.
So to revisit your question about Isis, no, we feel that the symbol of Enoch and the Enochian tradition represents a higher level of, shall we say, cosmic engineering that was on the planet at a much earlier date.
Was there extraterrestrial help there?
In the sense of what we've seen in these massive structures and underground passageways, without lights as we know it, definitely a hand of higher intelligence was involved, yes.
Without a doubt?
Without a doubt, because in the experience I had with what I call ultraterrestrial intelligence even more advanced than the extraterrestrial, it was clear that that structure we call the Great Pyramid would become a type of Bible in stone, a type of beacon of information that generations in the future would call upon.
Right, and in particular, of course, in the Keys of Enoch, as well as many now with Robert Bauval, say the pyramid points to Orion, and that's really one of the keys. Why did the pharaoh want to go to Orion? I mean, no one knew what Orion even was. It was just a big star constellation there. Now we realize that we're actually in the arm of Orion in the Milky Way, that there's actually an arm of the Orion arm. And in addition to that, what Dr. Hurtak had in his experience is that actually he saw how the 3 stars in the belt of Orion were like a vortex point to other dimensions, other realities. And this was true also in the Mayan culture. So the Mayans recognized Orion as like the father of the gods. And they actually have, a lot of their pyramids are based on the Orion construction.
That sure is. It's fascinating how they tie into celestial objects.
Not only that, but with the hydraulic systems underneath the pyramids, we've seen this in South America, we've seen this in Central America, we were able to work also in the Far East.
Right, like Chichen Itza right now, the main El Castillo, they found water underneath. Now, no person in their right mind would build something on top of water. I mean, that is ridiculous.
Unless.
Unless it means something, unless it can produce energy, unless there's some
Christopher Dunn believes it's a power plant.
Exactly, and really, I mean, to find water in these places, I mean, even Nikola Tesla actually wanted water underneath his structures.
But George, even more important, we did music tests with very special musicologists. We were able to examine the range of musical acoustical vibration, with that which the human ear could hear in subtonic resonance.
440 and 432.
Right.
Well, A sharp, F sharp were the 2 vibrations we got mostly in Egypt and in Mexico. We were able to do testing.
Used to push the blocks into place?
Well, it's a resonant chamber, but we think that there was probably some sort of frequencies that were used to levitate some
The
of the
open
blocks.
tomb in the king's chamber, the king's coffer as it is called, resonates with certain musical sounds or vibrations. So the chambers or rooms in the Great Pyramid represent, in our research, aspects of the human circulatory system. The heartbeat, for example, 68 to 72 beats, resonates with certain sounds. And I have a picture to show the audience I brought with me. In one case, when we used certain sounds inside the Great Pyramid, the Grand Gallery lit up in golden light for a few seconds.
Interesting.
So there's this whole sound physics based upon the construction of the Great Pyramid, showing that we are in the reddish portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. The open coffer of the king's chamber represents the humanity going through a process of ritualistic ascension. This plus the astrophysics, plus the water hydraulics underneath, plus the massive structures all throughout the Giza plateau over 19 square kilometers suggests that this is a super civil engineering that would take several Einsteins to figure out. So we've done the math, the physics, and the music test, and this will be published in a forthcoming book.
And you know what's very interesting, and as other people have done this, you take Easter Island, and then you move to Nazca, where you have the Paracas culture with the elongated heads and some other interesting things in Peru. And then you move to Machu Picchu, and you can draw a straight line all the way to Giza, and then you continue on to the area of Indonesia and that whole area of Angkor Wat. Now, when you talk about Angkor Wat and you say, how was it built, and you listen to legend, they said the blocks were all flown into place. So how did you get blocks flying into place if you didn't have some sort of vibrational
Wouldn't you love
frequency?
to have been there just to witness this?
Yeah.
Edgar Cayce, the late American prophet, talked about the Hall of Records at the base of the Sphinx. What do you think of that? Robert Schrock says that there's something down there.
A 9-foot deep water capsule, possibly used for baptism or ritual of some sort, Certainly there's a much larger chamber that needs to be explored. I was there with Dr. Dobecki, who did the sounding tests underneath the...
There is a structure down there.
Right. Boris Said and
There's a chamber.
And Dobecki were doing sound testing, and you could see this chamber.
It's a big one,
And
too.
they wanted to put fiber optic in, but it was like almost impossible.
The architectural sketches of the pyramids are probably down in there.
And we do feel even the Tomb of Osiris, which is really at also a grid point on the plateau, is part of that alignment. That really is all underground. We feel there's more under the ground of Giza than there is above the ground, and I think that's a very
The Keys of Enoch speak about a chamber inside the Sphinx, and so we discovered this chamber, and underneath the back of the chamber of the underground passageway to the pyramid complex itself. So we were down in that structure, although it was officially, shall we say, denied in the classical sense of Egyptology. We've been able to see the footprint that this was part of a much earlier period of construction.
And if I can jump for one more minute, we also recently, just last year, went to the Yucatan, and near Uxmal is another site that has underground structures, literally going also for 3 or 4 kilometers. And on top of that is something like 25 pyramids that have not been uncovered. The Mexican government doesn't even want to uncover another pyramid. It costs them so much to maintain each one. But there's so much in the whole Yucatan, and now recently, of course, National Geographic released information about Tikal, showing that there's probably 1 million+ people that had lived in that area.
That's fascinating. Now, if there might have been any ET involvement at all, a lot of people try to speculate, why did they come here? And did they seed here? You know, the Zecharia Sitchin theories, that the Anunnaki came here and created man from whatever species might have been on the planet. We've got a program on Gaia called Deep Space, and they somewhat address the possibilities that ET may have jump-started life here.
Could some of these beings from another planet not only be considered alien, but also human? If they were human, did they help seed the planet?
One of the more interesting theories when it comes to ancient astronauts is sort of the idea of like a progenitor civilization. That's to say, something along the lines of a very ancient, highly advanced culture that sort of seeded the universe, for want of a better term. And if you look at a lot of the entities that are reported in UFO encounters, going back to, say, the 40s and 50s, we have the very human-looking space brothers with the long hair, which a lot of people dismiss, but I don't write off a lot of those stories personally. Even the Greys, now they don't exactly look like us, but they, you know, there's a head, 2 eyes, vague nose, vague mouth, and 2 arms and 2 legs. So they are, in that sense, quite close to us. But what I find interesting is that when you're dealing with abductions, they very often take genetic material from the abductees. We're talking about like eggs, sperm, DNA, skin samples. If we were dealing with races of entities that were totally separate, I find it very difficult to think that our DNA and the raw materials they need from us would be totally compatible with them. That to me is too much of a coincidence. So I think that's why we can make a case of an ancient race seeding the universe, which, depending on the atmosphere and the gravity and the food and everything else of the relevant planet over millions of years, the Greys may have developed in a different physical fashion to what we have. You know, we're totally different really in many respects to like Cro-Magnon man or Neanderthal man, but they were still humans. But you know, they were different builds, their brain size was different. So I think we could be dealing with something like that, that's a civilization. Maybe it doesn't even exist anymore, but it was the original seeding of the universe or the galaxy.
It's our buddy Nick Redfern, fascinating theory.
Well,
Yes.
we agree with a lot of that because we personally feel that we are out there in space. And I think that he was kind of alluding to that, that you're not going to...
We're not really associating the Great Pyramid with the Greys. They were
Right.
beautiful people of greater height and majesty of mind and spirit. So we would consider them to be extra celestials as opposed to these Greys, which in many ways are, from the UFO community, possible biorobots that were created.
Right, and so the idea is that, you know, it's Greys or us. That's not how we see it. We see that there are many races out in space, and if you go to another planet, chances are you're going to find us. And that's really strange, right? Because you'd think that there'd be a little green man or a gray person, but how about finding us?
So as
And that's
futurists, we
interesting.
must see a positive future. We have the selective factor to go with the higher architects and bioengineers in the universe rather than be scared by these other experimental life forms. And I think that's the key distinction of our work throughout the world with university professors and anthropologists, archaeologists. We want to take the high road in showing that we can, to use biblical language, we can judge the angels. We can take the path of those who give us real science rather than play games with us.
Yeah, so we feel we colonized this planet, and almost like lost in space, you know, we were stuck out here for a little while, maybe in some primitive conditions. Eventually, more and more came when we developed the society. And ultimately, now that's why we have people who are like our cousins watching us. The people that saw Elizabeth Clare connected with her. She even had a baby with them, you know, because they were so close to us, looked just like her, but they lived on a different planet, so they had a little slightly different heart rhythm, she was told, so she couldn't stay there too long if she wanted to come back, because it would have been hard on her body to go back and forth and in that.
So the name of the planet is Metone. It's mentioning the Keys of Enoch.
And where is that? What constellation?
Alpha Centauri.
Okay.
That's what she's claiming. But it's interesting, this happened in the 50s to her. And so, you know, graves exist, reptilians exist, praying mantises exist, but they're all different races. When we were on this planet, we'll say 300,000 years ago, you had Homo erectus, you had Homo neanderthal, you had Homo naledi is now coming in, you had Homo florus, and now you have Denisovans. You know, so you had 5 different races living on this planet at the same time.
Similar but different.
Similar but different, right, exactly.
So our book is a biophysical code book showing how we can be programmed and how we can often participate in the bioengineering.
But what we think of who created the pyramids were not Greys, and I think he was actually alluding that it may be someone more like us, but we're those who are here to kind of establish our race, our connection, our Adamic species on this planet. And Dr. Hurtak feels that the pyramids even today are kind of like chronomonitors, that they're still sending out energies and beacons about consciousness and what's happening on the planet so that ETs can pick up, and I say ETs, Adamic species as well, can pick up on what's happening and watch the planet. I mean, we have the watchers all around.
Why come here? Why come here to this planet? Was it a mission to seed the planet? Is that what they may do? Maybe they go to Earth-like planets all throughout the solar system?
Well, clearly there are many reasons. Some could come by in their Lamborghinis and stop off long enough to take pictures of our interesting civilizations. Others come here with a sense of co-engineering with aspects of our human psyche, our human brain material that they need in their respective planetary societies. Others may look upon us as in need of scientific help. And again, the Keys speak of environmental change, climate change, that requires cooperation. That we must understand we are a homo universalis. We are universal humanity waking up to the fact that we're part of a cosmic family. And so we have to engineer, I believe, a new sociology and psychology that we are being prepared to be cosmic citizens. And our friends are, from the positive sense, giving us clues to look at our ancestry, where our ancestors had a much larger astronomy and cosmology, and we must adapt ourselves to new directions.
What about propulsion? How are they getting here?
Hyperspace navigation.
Yeah, and we've some of the information he had was electromagnetic fields and as well as hyperspace. So even though I said Alpha Centauri is nearby, 4 or 5 light years, you know, it doesn't take that long to even go to Orion, which is like 1,000 light years away. Of course, there's different stars in Orion, but even some stars of the belt. So, you know, basically, they can take their entire, we'll say, gravitational field with them and just, you know, move quickly. And
Are they bending space and time?
well, that's why they look so, and we agree with Bob Lazar on this, that's why they look so funky when they're here in our reality, because they can't function so well in our gravitational field. They have to be able to get that together to be able to move on to the next place. So it's really, yeah, bending space and time in that sense, or we worked a lot with remote viewing, and in remote viewing, you're actually non-local. So if you can start functioning with the non-local field, you're here and you're also there. It's kind of teleportation.
This is pointed out in our new book called Mind Dynamics in Space and Time with the noted physicist Elizabeth Rauscher, who worked at Stanford Research Institute. A 600-page book of the real X-Files that shows the work behind the scenes.
That's the one you signed over to me.
That's right. It's a book that will, should we say, open the public's eye to things that have gone on secretly for many years as to the power and potential we all have to move matter, to open the door of space-time reality to other dimensions, and to understand the psychology behind the phenomena of these so-called strange objects. We're interested in the cosmic who's who is behind these probes, who is doing the research, and why are some, shall we say, considered negative as opposed to others that are transformative? What is the spiritual psychology, if there's any? And if that's to be defined, do we need a new language?
And let's face it, if you talk about angels or you talk about ET, almost all the communication is telepathic.
Sure.
It's part of this kind of communication wave. Now we have that ability. That's what remote viewing tells us, that when the remote viewers really looked at some place in Russia and they were living in California, they actually didn't send and receive a signal. From data from Russell Targ and Elizabeth Rauscher, who we co-wrote that book with, basically they put their minds there. They were already there consciously, and it was part of their own field. It's very unbelievable for us to understand that because we're so linear and we use our voice all the time to speak, but in actuality, consciousness is a much more vast reality. And so with consciousness also goes technology.
Out of consciousness, we have the material universe, but we also have the mental universe. And so what we're saying is the whole concept of evolution has to be understood as coming out of the consciousness of the universal mind. And the universal mind simply didn't produce humans and ETs. No, there were other categories: extraterrestrials, ultraterrestrials, even interterrestrials. All of these different categories require a whole new biological textbook, which we're engaged in writing with other experts. So to summarize, we're interested in looking behind the scenes at who is doing the real research using the scientific method, who is working with a planetary understanding of the what we call the pyramidal grid system that covers all major cultures, linking us with these pyramids as astrophysical computers or beacons of information that other cosmic societies can tap into. And also we're working with the whole understanding of a new image of humanity. What will happen to us beyond disclosure, that we are not alone in the universe, that we are invited to join a family of nations of advanced ET and UT levels of intelligence.
And what are UTs?
Ultraterrestrials are beyond physical form. Ultraterrestrials are not subject to the laws of thermodynamics or physical classical science as we define it. They're in the realm of what we call the angelic, the higher dimensional of the avatars, or in the Sanskrit traditions, the Maha-avatars, the superior minds who have gone beyond evolution and yet can activate some aspect of human evolution.
Are they in other universes?
In some ways, consciousness universes. And so here we come up with the idea of multiverse or multi-universe as a model of future understanding. In fact, we wrote a scientific paper on the internet with Elizabeth Rauscher called The Multiverse,
Yeah.
where we go into the mathematics and physics. For those who are interested, go to the website of Future Science, or at least call up our scientific papers.
But what's interesting is, you know, these beings, whether you're praying to God or looking at extraterrestrials, or even looking in some cases at these ultra-terrestrial beings, in many cases, they don't have to like come here, like leave where they are, come here. The higher beings actually just send their consciousness and they can materialize because it's entangled.
Sure.
There's this entangled reality in this consciousness realm of non-locality, which scientists are now starting to understand, Bell's theorem, all this, and it allows us and them to communicate. And we've been ignoring that for thousands of years, but I think the ancients understood that.
So we are multidimensional beings. We are local as well as non-local. We can be here, but we can also be there. And this is taking the Einstein, Podolsky-Rosen, shall we say, paradox into new science, realizing that we are now opening the door to a whole new realm of consciousness, physics, whereby we'll be able to understand our cosmic cousins, quote unquote. We'll be able to understand the mystery of the Christ-like figures in the ancient text. We'll be able to understand our role in a whole new development as we become cosmic citizens.
And I have to say, the pyramid is not just a single-use technology. We believe it's actually a triple-use technology. It is a way of connecting with the star systems of Orion. It is a way of getting technology and energy and gas connected with water and hydrogen. But it is also a way of, we'll say, initiation, because I and other people have sat in the King's Chamber, done sacred prayers and mantras, and it seems like the walls go away, and there's a whole new vibratory structure that's there that's able to augment. In fact, our sound testing in the King's Chamber has shown that the vibrations that you create actually don't go up into alternative sounds, but they go down into like creating alpha and theta waves in your system. So you're actually creating almost like the Tibetan sounds in your mind and puts you into a meditative state.
One of our sound engineers did the sound for the Star Trek series. We have had some of the best musicologists in the world. As you know, also Carlos Santana has worked with us. His new music illustrates a whole new generation of taking spiritual or higher elevated sounds and bringing that into the social situation of changing our culture of death into a culture of positive thinking, positive sound. So vibration, the physics of acoustics, is also part of these pyramid complexes throughout the world. We believe that we are part of a spiritual evolution. We're going into what we'll call a spiritual quantum field, whereby we will be able to understand the mysteries of the great prophets, the great avatars, and even the Christ figure that influence Western civilization. Namely, we believe that there is a type of higher consciousness that will allow us to be Christed or anointed, to think multidimensionally and to work as multidimensional beings.
But we do have to do something ourselves. And I liked you said, do we meditate more? And yes, that would be good. You know, yoga is very popular here, I know, with Gaia itself. So all these things help us to get more in tune. And the idea is that we're interested in extraterrestrials. We do believe they exist, but we're also interested in telling people there is a higher beings of light, ultraterrestrials, angelic messengers, whatever you want to call them, even a divine Godhead, which we also believe wholeheartedly. And you can work with all those levels of intelligence, and they align you. They help your physical body to be more holistic, so to speak, and they also help our consciousness to know what we should do. Every moment of the day, we have decisions to make. We have decisions that will take us in one direction or another, and these higher beings actually can help us in our direction. Now, it's up to us. We have free will on everything that we have to do, but it's also ability that we have within ourselves to go in a divine direction.
You agree with that, JJ?
Yes, I do. In fact, we had the privilege of working with the late astronaut Gordon Cooper and also astronaut Edgar Mitchell.
Well, both of them were believers in
Right,
ETs.
and they
Gordon saw things. Edgar did not. He always told me he never saw anything on the moon or anything, but he was told by people within government that we're being visited.
I showed him a document of 3 vehicles that were on the surface of the moon, and he blinked when he saw this, which is to say there's more to the story than that was officially released over the years.
And of course, Buzz Aldrin was someone who also has come out slightly with some understanding.
Slightly. He said it's unidentified, but he said not necessarily extraterrestrial.
Astronaut Gordon Cooper and I participated in a book by the famous American novelist Sidney Sheldon called Doomsday Conspiracy, and we go into a fictional account of a real story of an American intelligence agent who met with a extraterrestrial in Switzerland. And so what we're saying is, even within the camp of the pioneers of outer space, Gordy Cooper and others, there is a understanding that we're being prepared cosmically to play our place in the greater role of humanity of the future. We are a spaceborne intelligence. According to the Greeks, we come out of the logospermatozoid, the sperm or the seeds of evolution. We are shaped by divine forces. We are here to enjoy this life for a short period of time, after which we go back into the consciousness vehicle from which we've come, or life after life, the eternal self.
It is amazing that I think the Bible makes reference to angels, which could be extraterrestrial. Does not negate the belief in God by any means, but I think that's what they're talking about. What do you think?
Well, the late Dr. Billy Graham mentioned that UFOs may be God's secret angels or agents, implying that there's more to biblical cosmology. And part of my work is to show that many of the biblical stories have a higher understanding in terms of the consciousness physics of life. And as we evolve ourselves, as we begin to realize we are non-local beings, we begin to understand what the ancient scriptures speak of. They speak of higher states of awareness through which we go into dialogue with the divine process of life.
Do you believe angels are ETs?
I believe that the angels are of different categories, some of which would be more ultra-terrestrial rather than ETs. I make that distinction. Angels are beyond physical technology. The physical technology of ETs can break down in space, has to be, shall we say, repaired from time to time. The angelic dimension is a whole category by itself. So this is a new phase of science that we need to look at, the ultra-terrestrial physics of universal
Right, and that's what he
intelligence.
saw with Enoch and Metatron. His body was only taken to a certain point, and then beyond that, there was an energy body or light body that was taken by Metatron to higher realms. So that there's different levels of intelligence, and that's part of our work, to expand our cosmology, not just to extraterrestrials, but to multidimensional realities.
What does this tell you about this planet in whole? Everything we've talked about in Beyond Belief today.
It tells us that this planet is a schoolhouse, and we're here for a certain amount of years to acquire the knowledge we will need in the next phase of cosmic evolution. And in our research, we have come to the point that the doors to the cosmic university are beginning to open. Our friends from outer space have been cautious, those that are positive, in sort of keeping us aware that there's more to come. And we're seeing now the combination of what we would call spiritual evolution and scientific evolution. They're both coming together. A whole new realm of possibilities is suddenly being open to us. But we must be very careful in how we use our positive energy in association with many societies in outer space. We have to take the upper path.
Right, and I would say the important thing for people is to realize we're not alone. And, you know, that gives hope to people that there is a future, whether it's in the physical body or in a consciousness higher body, we have potential, and that we're being watched and guided. Technology is being given, consciousness, ideas, and understanding is being given. We have to choose, of course, but individually, we all have a greater potential.
It could scare other people, though. Dr. David Jacobs believes that these visitations are not friendly.
He's a good scholar, he's a good scientist, and I believe there's a certain percentage of those from other worlds that we have to be careful of. And therefore, in our research, we've used, as it were, the linguistics of the names of God, used by the prophets, the great thinkers, the great teachers. And using prophetic language, we believe that there's a preparation of how we can screen or how we can prepare ourselves for different levels of mental and physical conversation.
Right, it's like a cosmic telephone number. If you have the right codes, you call in those beings that are more like you, whereas others, you know, are connected with different types of beings. And there are other various energies in the universe, just like you'd be attracting people on this planet. Do you want the really good guys that are here to help, or you want the guys that are robbing and stealing all the time? So there, you have that reality in the local universe. That's what the ancient book of Enoch even talked about, that the local heavens actually have these different realities.
So we have nothing to fear?
Well, we have fear itself, as the late President Roosevelt said.
Sure.
But in terms of being in the image of the divine, in terms of having, as it were, a higher understanding of the scriptural truths of all great cultures, and the understanding of having a wonderful heart that feels compassion, love for humanity, I feel we take a step beyond the fear dimension into the light, into the glory of God's presence, and the recognition of what he meant when he said he sent the Christ into this world to remind us that we have a house of many mansions to prepare for. Why would this higher cosmology be given, even symbolically, if there were not essential truths that were there in the ancient prophetic language? So whether we use the Greek traditions of ion upon ion, eternity after eternity, or whether we use the Hebrew Aramaic, or for that matter, the Eastern Oriental languages that speak of the celestial realms of creation, I think there's a great incentive for us to engineer a positive future by taking, as it were, a positive look at new science, psychology, sociology, with the ability to open the back door to the Old Testament and the front door to the New Testament, realizing that we're on the edge of the greatest moment of human history, realizing there are greater positive forces than the few negative.
Right, in the Keys of Enoch, when he was given this information, saw it, he actually understood that it was in 64 areas of science, so that our genetics are advancing, so we understand our cosmic others, our astronomy is advancing, so we understand the heavenly realms, and even our history, our knowledge. Look, you have 130,000-year-old evidence of mastodon bones and beings, people living in San Diego, as you know from that recent find. So we understand our past, that we're not just 6,000 years old, we're not even just 40,000 or 400,000 years old. Chances are we're actually cosmic. So this is part of the information, and when information comes into our reality, people pick up on it and people run with it.
Future science is science guided by consciousness, and so our work is to emphasize the consciousness side of what all this new science means, of remote viewing, remote healing, remote communication, and the ability to co-engineer with our cosmic counterparts a new cosmology, that we're not alone in the universe, and we have responsibilities as a planetary society helping all humanity to make this quantum change.
Give our Beyond Belief audience your website and how they can track you.
Well, we have two websites. keysofenoch.org is our main site, and we also have futurescience.org because we always think there's going to be a future, and science is part of it.
We have many books and many music experiences with some of the legendary minds and musicians like Ellis Coltrane, Jocelyn Smith from Berlin, Stephen Halpern from the United States. Some of the great musicians are using the sacred expressions or experiences that allowed me to see briefly the other side, that we're not alone, and they're beings of light, not extraterrestrials, but ultraterrestrials, who provide for us now this greater education that we're going into.
That's fascinating. Thanks for being on Beyond Belief.
Thank you.
Isn't it an incredible theory, the possibilities that we've been visited, not just from extraterrestrials from other planetary systems, but now from other universes? I'm George Norrie. Thanks for watching Beyond Belief.